About Heidelberg. Heidelberg is the fifth largest city in the German state of Baden-Württemberg, and with a population of about 163,000, of which roughly a quarter consists of students, it is Germany's 51st largest city. Located about 78 kilometers 48 miles south of Frankfurt, Heidelberg is part of the densely populated Rhine-Neckar Metropolitan Region, which has its center in Mannheim. Heidelberg is located on the Neckar River, at the point where it leaves its narrow valley between the Oden Forest and the Little Oden Forest, and enters the wide Upper Rhine Plain. The old town lies in the valley, the end of which is flanked by the Königstuhl in the south and the Heiligenberg in the north. The majority of the population lives in the districts west of the mountains in the Upper Rhine Plain, into which the city has expanded over time. Heidelberg University, founded in 1386, is Germany's oldest and one of Europe's most reputable universities. Heidelberg is a scientific hub in Germany and home to several internationally renowned research facilities adjacent to its university, including the European Molecular Biology Laboratory and four Max Planck Institutes. The city has also been a hub for the arts, especially literature, throughout the centuries, and it was designated a City of Literature by the UNESCO Creative Cities Network. Heidelberg was a seat of government of the former electorate of the Palatinate and is a popular tourist destination due to its romantic cityscape, including Heidelberg Castle, the Philosopher's Walk, and the Baroque Old Town. Heidelberg history. Early history. Between 600,000 and 200,000 years ago, Heidelberg man died at nearby Mauer. His jawbone was discovered in 1907. Scientific dating determined his remains as the earliest evidence of human life in Europe. In the 5th century BC, a Celtic fortress of refuge and place of worship were built on the Heiligenberg, or Holy Mountain. Both places can still be identified. In 40 AD, a fort was built and occupied by the 24th Roman cohort and the 2nd Cyrenaican cohort CCG-Ciain and CCH-2 Sir. The late Roman Emperor Valentinian I, in 369 AD, built new and maintained older castra permanent camps and a signal tower on the bank of the Neckar. They built a wooden bridge based on stone pillars across it. The camp protected the first civilian settlements and was eventually captured by Germanic tribes. The local administrative center in Roman times was the nearby city of Lopajunum, today known as Leidenburg. Middle Ages. Modern Heidelberg can trace its beginnings to the 5th century. The village Bergheim mountain home is first mentioned for that period in documents dated to 769 AD. Bergheim now lies in the middle of modern Heidelberg. The people gradually converted to Christianity. In 870 AD, the monastery of Saint Michael was founded on the Heiligenberg inside the double rampart of the Celtic fortress. Around 1130, the Neuburg Monastery was founded in the Neckar Valley. At the same time, the bishopric of Worms extended its influence into the valley, founding Skona Abbey in 1142. Modern Heidelberg can trace its roots to this 12th century monastery. The first reference to Heidelberg can be found in a document in Skona Abbey dated to 1196. This is considered to be the town's founding date. In 1156, Heidelberg Castle and its neighboring settlement were taken over by the House of Hohenstaufen. Conrad of Hohenstaufen became Count Palatine of the Rhine-German, Pfalzgraf bei Rhein. In 1195, the electorate of the Palatinate passed to the House of Welf through marriage. In 1214, Ludwig I, Duke of Bavaria acquired the Palatinate, as a consequence of which the castle came under his control. By 1303, another castle had been constructed for defense. In 1356, the Counts Palatine were granted far-reaching rights in the Golden Bull, in addition to becoming electors. In 1386, Heidelberg University was founded by Rupert I, Elector Palatine. Modern history. Heidelberg University played a leading part in medieval scholasticism, Renaissance humanism, the German Reformation, and in the subsequent conflict between Lutheranism and Calvinism during the 15th and 16th centuries. In April 1518, a few months after proclaiming his 95 Theses, Martin Luther was received in Heidelberg, to defend them. Heidelberg's library, founded in 1421, is the oldest existing public library in Germany. In 1537, the castle located higher up the mountain was destroyed by a gunpowder explosion. The Duke's Palace was built at the site of the lower castle. Elector Frederick III, sovereign of the Electoral Palatinate from 1559 to 1576, commissioned the composition of a new catechism for his territory. While the catechism's introduction credits the entire theological faculty here at the University of Heidelberg and all the superintendents and prominent servants of the Church for the composition of the catechism, Zacharias Asinus is commonly regarded as the catechism's principal author. Caspar Olevianus 1536–1587 was formerly asserted as a co-author of the document, though this theory has been largely discarded by modern scholarship. Johann Sylvan, Adam Neusser, Johannes Willing, Thomas Erastus, Michael Diller, Johannes Brunner, Tilman Mummius, Petrus Macheropoulos, Johannes Eisenmenger, Emmanuel Tremelius, and Pierre Beauquin are all likely to have contributed to the catechism in some way. Frederick himself wrote the preface to the catechism and closely oversaw its composition and publication. Frederick, who was officially Lutheran but had strong Reformed leanings, wanted to even out the religious situation of his highly Lutheran territory within the primarily Catholic Holy Roman Empire. The Council of Trent had just concluded with its conclusions and decrees against the Protestant faiths, and the Peace of Augsburg had only granted toleration for Lutheranism within the empire where the ruler was Lutheran. One of the aims of the Catechism was to counteract the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church as well as Anabaptists and strict Niceno-Lutherans like Tilman Hessius and Matthias Flacius, who were resisting Frederick's Reformed influences, particularly on the matter of Eucharist, the Lord's Supper. The Catechism based each of its statements on biblical proof texts, and Frederick himself would defend it as biblical, not Reformed, at the 1566 Diet of Augsburg when he was called to answer to charges of violating the Peace of Augsburg. This was the Heidelberg Catechism, officially called the Catechism, or Christian Instruction, according to the usages of the churches and schools of the Electoral Palatinate. In November 1619, the royal crown of Bohemia was offered to the elector, Frederick V. He was married to Princess Elizabeth, eldest daughter of James VI and I of Scotland and England, respectively. Frederick became known as the Winter King, as he reigned for only one winter before the imperial house of Habsburg regained Bohemia by force. His overthrow in 1621 marked the beginning of the 30 Years' War. In 1622, after a siege of 2 months, the armies of the Catholic League, commanded by Johann Claes, Count of Tilly, captured the town. Tilly gave the famous Bibliotheca Palatina from the Church of the Holy Spirit to the Pope as a present. The Catholic and Bavarian House of Wittelsbach gained control over the Palatinate and the title of Prince Elector. In late 1634, after the Swedish army had conquered Heidelberg, imperial forces attempted to recapture the city. They quickly took the city, but were unable to take the castle. As they prepared to blow up its fortifications with gunpowder, the French army arrived, 30,000 men strong, led by Urbain de Maillebreeze, who had fought in many battles and participated in the siege of La Rochelle 1627–1628, and Jacques Nampart de Caumont, Duc de la Force. They broke the siege and drove off the imperial forces. In 1648, at the end of the war, Frederick V's son Charles I Louis, Elector Palatine, was able to recover his titles and lands. To strengthen his dynasty, Charles I Louis arranged the marriage of his daughter Lieselotte to Philippi, Duke of Orleans, brother of Louis XIV, King of France. In 1685, after the death of Charles Louis' son, Elector Charles II, King Louis XIV laid claim to his sister-in-law's inheritance. The Germans rejected the claim, in part because of religious differences between local Protestants and the French Catholics, as the Protestant Reformation had divided the peoples of Europe. The War of the Grand Alliance ensued. In 1689, French troops took the town and castle, bringing nearly total destruction to the area in 1693. As a result of the destruction due to repeated French invasions related to the War of the Palatinate succession coupled with severe winters, thousands of German Calvinist Palatines emigrated in the early 18th century. They fled to other European cities and especially to London, where the refugees were called the Poor Palatines. In sympathy for the Protestants, in 1709 to 1710, Queen Anne's government arranged transport for nearly 6,000 Palatines to New York. Others were transported to Pennsylvania, and to South Carolina. They worked their passage and later settled in the English colonies there. In 1720, after assigning a major church for exclusively Catholic use, religious conflicts with the mostly Protestant inhabitants of Heidelberg caused the Roman Catholic Prince-Elector Charles III Philip to transfer his court to nearby Mannheim. The court remained there until the Elector Charles Theodore became Elector of Bavaria in 1777 and established his court in Munich. In 1742, Elector Charles Theodore began rebuilding the palace. In 1764, a lightning bolt destroyed other palace buildings during reconstruction, causing the work to be discontinued. In 1803 to 1933, Heidelberg fell to the Grand Duchy of Baden in 1803. Charles Frederick, Grand Duke of Baden, refounded the university, named Ruperto Carola after its two founders. Notable scholars soon earned it a reputation as a royal residence of the intellect. In the 18th century, the town was rebuilt in the Baroque style on the old medieval layout. In 1810 the French Revolution refugee Count Charles Graimberg began to preserve the palace ruins and establish a historical collection. In 1815, the Emperor of Austria, the Emperor of Russia and the King of Prussia formed the Holy Alliance in Heidelberg. In 1848, the German National Assembly was held there. In 1849, during the Palatinate-Baden Rebellion of the 1848 revolutions, Heidelberg was the headquarters of a revolutionary army. It was defeated by a Prussian army near Waggiesel. The city was occupied by Prussian troops until 1850. Between 1920 and 1933, Heidelberg University became a center of notable physicians Czerny, Erb, and Krell, and humanists Rode, Weber, and Gandalf. Nazism and the World War II period. During the Nazi period 1933 to 1945, Heidelberg was a stronghold of the Endstab Nazi Party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the strongest party in the elections before 1933. The Endstab obtained 30% at the communal elections of 1930. The Endstab received 45.9% of the votes in the German federal election of March 1933. The national average was 43.9%. In 1934 and 1935 the Reichsarbeitsdienst State Labor Service and Heidelberg University students built the huge Thingstadt Amphitheater on the Heiligenberg north of the town, for Nazi Party and SS events. A few months later, the inauguration of the huge Ehrenfriedhof Memorial Cemetery completed the second and last Endstab project in Heidelberg. This cemetery is on the southern side of the old part of town, a little south of the Königstuhl hilltop, and faces west towards France. during World War II and after, Wehrmacht soldiers were buried there. During the Kristallnacht on November 9, 1938, Nazis burned down synagogues at 2 locations in the city. The next day, they started the systematic deportation of Jews, sending 150 to Dachau concentration camp. On October 22, 1940, during the Wagner-Bürkel event, the Nazis deported 6,000 local Jews, including 281 from Heidelberg, to Camp Gurs concentration camp in France. Within a few months, as many as 1,000 of them 201 from Heidelberg died of hunger and disease. Among the deportees from Heidelberg, the poet Alfred Mombert 1872–1942 left the concentration camp in April 1941 thanks to the Swiss poet Hans Reinhardt, but died shortly thereafter due to illness he contracted while held prisoner. From 1942, the deportees who had survived internment in Gurs were deported to Eastern Europe, where most of them were murdered. The U.S. 44th Infantry Division took part in combat in Western Europe throughout 1944 and early 1945, and the division's artillery commander, Brigadier General William A. Biederlinden, became the subject of international headlines in March 1945, when he helped save Heidelberg from bombing by persuading Nazi troops to withdraw. When his command was ordered to shell the city, Biederlinden took the initiative to contact the burgomaster and attempt to persuade Nazi soldiers to abandon their positions. Though burgomasters were forbidden from conducting such talks, Heidelberg's burgomaster ignored warnings from the local Nazi Gauleiter and discussed the matter with Biederlinden. The negotiations focused on the importance of sparing Heidelberg University and other historic and culturally significant sites. Biederlinden and the burgomaster agreed to terms, and the Nazis spared the city by evacuating. On March 29, 1945, German troops left the city after destroying 3 arches of the old bridge, Heidelberg's treasured river crossing. They also destroyed the more modern bridge downstream. The U.S. Army 63rd Infantry, 7th Army entered the town on March 30, 1945. The civilian population surrendered without resistance. Heidelberg, unlike most German cities and towns, was spared from Allied bombing raids during the war. A popular belief is that Heidelberg escaped bombing because the U.S. Army wanted to use the city as a garrison after the war, but, as Heidelberg was neither an industrial center nor a transport hub, it did not present a tactical or strategic target. Other notable university towns, such as Tübingen and Göttingen, were spared bombing as well. Allied air raids focused extensively on the nearby industrial cities of Mannheim and Ludwigshafen. The U.S. Army may have chosen Heidelberg as a garrison base because of its excellent infrastructure, including the Heidelberg-Mannheim Autobahn motorway, which connected to the Mannheim, Darmstadt, Frankfurt Autobahn, and the U.S. Army installations in Mannheim and Frankfurt. The intact rail infrastructure was more important in the late 1940s and early 1950s when most heavy loads were still carried by train, not by truck. Heidelberg had the untouched Wehrmacht barracks, the Großdeutschland-Kaserne, which the U.S. Army occupied soon after, renaming it the Campbell Barracks. History after 1945. In 1945, the university was reopened relatively quickly on the initiative of a small group of professors, among whom were the anti-Nazi economist Alfred Weber and the philosopher Karl Jaspers. The surgeon Karl Heinrich Bauer was nominated rector. On December 9, 1945, U.S. Army General George S. Patton was involved in a car accident in the adjacent city of Mannheim and died in the Heidelberg U.S. Army Hospital on December 21, 1945. His funeral ceremony was held at the Heidelberg Weststadt Christuskirche Christ Church, and he was buried in the 3rd Army Cemetery in Luxembourg. During the post-war military occupation, the U.S. Army used the Thingstadt for cultural and religious events. Civilian use started in the early to mid-1980s for occasional concerts and other cultural events. Today, the celebrations on Hexennacht, German for Witches' Night, also called Walpurgis-Night, the night of April 30th, are a regular underground fixture at the Thingstadt. Thousands of mostly young people congregate there to drum, to breathe fire, and to juggle. The event has gained fame throughout the region, as well as a certain notoriety due to the amount of litter left behind. Officially, this event is forbidden due to security concerns. The city declares it will fence the Thingstadt and prosecute any trespassers. In 2022, a mass shooting occurred in the university, killing a woman and injuring 3 other people. The gunman then committed suicide. Note: Heidelberg, an old city in Germany located in Baden-Württemberg, is an interesting new German tourist spot. Famous for its university and old castle, Heidelberg remained intact during World War II. The city has the longest pedestrian street in Europe, surrounded by well-preserved old buildings on both sides. For more details, don't forget to also visit the source website of the article that I have listed in the description column. Thank you. Hopefully useful.